Hi, welcome to this episode of the Broke Girl Society podcast. I'm Christina, and today we are back with Kitty Martz, who is the executive director of the Voices of Problem Gambling Recovery out of Oregon. She is a woman who has been in a long-term recovery from problem gambling, and I'm just enjoying these conversations as part of the Kitty Chronicles and just getting to listen to her stories and the things that she's discovered along the way. This episode is titled Ambivalence and Radical Acceptance. And we're just talking about behaviors and thoughts and things that we struggled with or that other people have struggled with when it comes to terms of what they think of compulsive gamblers. So it's a great conversation, and I really appreciate you guys listening in. So I'm just going to roll on into the episode. So hi, Kitty.
Hi, Christina. Thanks for having me. And yeah, ambivalence, it's kind of a funny word because when you think about when someone says, I'm ambivalent, that might mean I'm not quite sure, I'm reluctant. I think when you delve a little deeper into the etymology of the word, it's kind of two things being true at the same time. In Eastern religion, sometimes you hear about radical acceptance, that there can be opposites, but they exist in the same world. And so I've found, and I know, I've talked about this a lot, that there can be different things we take on our recovery path from gambling disorders that really don't match, and yet both work. So yeah,
absolutely.
Let's talk about a couple of them. Now, I am just here as a woman in long-term recovery from gambling disorder. I'm not representing the agency I work for or anything, and I certainly would never want to offend anyone. Not putting down any particular program, just have been exposed to like a lot of different ideas. And I found that by creating the questions of, does this land for me, helps us decide both what works for us and making space for counter arguments that can be helpful to our recovery. So I kind of want to create it in a way of like point counterpoint with you and I, like taking a stand on some of these things of, oh yeah, it's definitely this. And I think it's possible that you and I feel sort of opposite on this one. I know we've talked about this one during the money episode, but first ambivalence idea is that when we had our gambling disorder, we were trying to win money.
Yeah, for me, I can't say that it wasn't that not trying to win money. It was not trying to win enough money that I thought I was going to be able to retire, or my family was going to be retired. I hear a lot of that where they were going for that big win. I was going to escape, but I was also chasing my losses.
Yeah. And whether or not you wanted to win a ton of money, there's this weird part about it that it has to be fueled by some kind of risk. So we had to have some money behind it, and not just pennies, but enough that might hurt a little to make it exciting.
Yeah, especially as my bets got higher and higher.
You built up tolerance.
Yeah, and maybe I haven't really analyzed that so much, but there could be some truth to that for me.
If you got a present from a well-intentioned family member who's like, hey, Christina, we got you a video slot machine to keep in your basement. Here's the key. You can just put as much money into it as you want. And then when you run out, you can just take the key and take the money back out and put it back in again. Okay. What would that be like?
Yeah, it wouldn't tempt me. Wouldn't tempt me the same way. I wouldn't get the high. I wouldn't get the high from the risk. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Isn't that wild? Yeah. So that's like on one hand. On the other hand, I was in it for the dopamine, and there was like no limit on how much we would pay for dopamine. Like when you talk to most people that have been through what we have, it's kind of like there's gambling money, and certainly any money we win from gambling is automatically gambling money, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's going back in. That is time and share is what that is. That's also any kind of like windfall money, like an unexpected check or a bonus or something. That's
absolutely
usually right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we also, I don't know if you did this as much, had the sense that there would be a finish line, that somehow I would win so much. I'm not sure how much it would be money. And then I will have achieved what I'd set out to do and I wouldn't need to gamble anymore. But the interesting thing is, I don't know what that number would have been. Like, it's almost like I just sort of made that up. I would have
Yeah,
just
me
wanted to
either.
gamble more.
Would
Yeah.
I have stopped,
Hmm.
or would I have
Hmm.
gambled myself right back into the same situation?
Can you imagine the tolerance? Like, you see those shows, those like famous athletes that had gambling disorders, and they were doing like, $100,000 a hand or something just to feel anything because there was so much money involved. So what we say at the agency I work at is, was it about the money? Both yes and no. It really was. And that's what this talk about ambivalence is, two things being true at once. Okay, here's a really sensitive one for a lot of us out there right now. Responsible gambling. Mm.
You knew I was going to go off on that one.
Mm.
It's the term responsible gambling, I think, that gets me more than anything, because I know that there are more people that can go in and gamble normally. I think it comes down to the wordplay for me, because responsibly doesn't speak risk to me. It doesn't speak danger to me. And I think that's probably where I get the most upset with when it comes to responsible gambling. I don't think we need to be talking about responsible or not. I think we need to be talking about awareness of the fact that it could be a problem. And for me, responsible doesn't speak to that.
It puts the onus on the player, not on the operator.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the operator is consistently looking for ways to keep our time on the seat, so we're playing till extinction, that we're gambling faster, that the spins are going faster, that we have more money we can wager, that they're using kind of predatory tools, if you ask me, of doing things that maybe disguise when we've lost as a win, and whistles and bells go off, and I was like, wait a minute, I just lost money. Or it gets confusing what credits are. How much is a credit worth? So I would say that responsible gambling has had enough chitter chatter about set a time and a budget, and that could be a very, very small percentage of how we invest that kind of dedicated money for treatment and prevention, to talk of set a time and a budget. And let's talk more with operators about having legit tools in place. And if that's having things like that you require player cards, and that folks need to, can't remember what the word for that is that they're doing in the UK now, but you actually have to prove you have enough money that you can afford to lose.
Yeah, they ask for bank statements. They look at your financial situation. And so, yeah, I think that would be a great tool to be able to, it's one of many ways that they could slow down the predatory.
Just slow it down. Yeah. My biggest concern with gambling is that most folks up until just recently had to go somewhere and wear shoes and sit in a seat and be relatively not intoxicated or under the influence of substances, and there were other people around for safety, and then you got to go home at some point. And now that we're going to be so online, and I know most of the women you hang out with had online addiction. That's not the case where I am. We mostly go to Oregon Video Lottery brick and mortar venues like bars and delis to play, that they close at like 10 p.m. midnight. Well, if you can sit home on your smartphone in your PJs and just press a button and transfer money that's just cashless, just boom, from not just your checking, but from your credit to your app to play, and that you can do it in secrecy, that there's just like no governor that stops it. Governor, I mean like safety mechanism of literally setting a time and a budget. Why not have the operator have some onus in setting a time and a budget? So it gets me thinking about, like, as an analogy, like when marijuana used to be that, like, you roll a blunt mixed with tobacco and smoke a joint or something back in the 60s. And It's kind of a whole different product now that cannabis is legal. It's legal for recreational use in my state. And it's been like methodized, that it's mixed in a way that it's more like shatter. It's a very, very hallucinogenic drug that's much, much stronger, yet it's still being treated like blunts from the 60s. And it's not at all the same product. And it seems like when we talk about responsible gambling, that responsible gambling of days gone by, like going to the horse tracks or something, is going to be different than staying home in our yoga pants, playing on our phones that's cashless, and that it's not being regulated in a way that's keeping up with keeping people safe. So yeah, I think we're kind of in agreement on that one. Yeah, okay.
Definitely.
Here's one I know that you're motivated by, and you well should be. How much time do you have, lady?
I am just over 8 months.
I can see your keychain tags behind you.
Yes.
They're like a beautiful rainbow of recovery, and I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
8 months consecutively?
Yes.
May I celebrate on your behalf the months before that where you had some freedom from gambling too?
Sure. I started my recovery the 1st of January, and then I relapsed at the beginning of March.
Yeah.
And then I picked it back up a few days later. So I only had a few days of a little bit of a spiral slip, but I picked it right back up.
Yeah. And that truth and that integrity is integral to your program, to say my date resets and I'm not going to be ashamed, but I'm going to start the clock over. Yep. Right.
Yep.
I work more in the like ways to measure recovery outside of time is motivating to me. So I also look at things like my quality of life, if I'm aligning my behavior with my values, that I'm forming rich relationships with people, very close relationships with people I'm close to, more relationships with kind of people I mix with, which has been harder during COVID, but just having a circle of folks that want to be around me and respect and like me because I'm present, that I'm doing things I enjoy, that my word is good, that I show up. I mean, you can measure it in any amount of things. Time since you last missed a payment on bills or had to borrow money. But one thing I try to get away from when I work as a peer mentor is this thing that the gambling demon tries to do sometimes is it pops out of its cage, your symptoms return, it shows up for a minute, and then there's this devastation of I have to go with hat in hand back to a meeting and say I have a new date, that I messed up, or whatever language they use. And though that's humbling and does kind of remind us how important it is to have all hands on deck in fighting this thing, it's hard to see it be demoralizing to the point that people kind of go into a shame bubble. And though I've never seen anyone in any kind of meeting be like, you know, dang it, Christina, you dummy, you weren't listening. You need to humble up. There's never anything but support. I do hear people having irrational, unhelpful beliefs that fill in those blanks and hear those messages. So I don't identify with my last day gambled because I want to normalize getting away from that, of that being the defining element to what our quality of recovery can be.
Sure.
Yeah. All right, here's another one that's kind of sensitive to talk about. And again, in no way putting a program down, but when you hear like court-ordered folks or clinicians say, you need to go to Gamblers Anonymous, and when you get there, you're going to have a sponsor work the steps and have a pressure relief group and get your finances all fixed up.
Well, for one, if you were in my state, you wouldn't have a pressure relief group, and sponsors are extremely hard to come by, and it's not a fix-all situation by any means. So to have somebody who absolutely doesn't understand the recovery program determine what it's going to be, can be a little infuriating.
Yeah, it's limiting. Those are all things that are needed in our recovery. And like we just were talking about in the funny money episode, it's so important to have some kind of financial plan and putting some time and space between us and our money. But I've also found it difficult to engage in having a pressure relief group. There's not a ton of women sponsors in our area. They're really few and far between. GA seems to be a little more heavily attended by the fellas, and there's just kind of a different vibe to it. So my sponsor, he did just pass away, was a man. He's a 78-year-old man who sponsored a lot of the young women in Oregon here, and we were so grateful to have him. There's lots of ways to supplement the role those folks fill. If you can't find a sponsor that's giving you what you need, maybe you could find a mentor. Maybe you could have someone from one of the other 12-step programs that's open, like AA or NA if you live in a rural area, that just understands addiction and can walk alongside you in your recovery path to supplement your GA experience. Maybe you can have a payee or an accountant or someone that's a financial expert to walk you through your financial recovery plan.
Yeah, absolutely. There's
Yeah.
so many different ways.
Yeah. Hey, Christina, did anyone ever tell you that you're stupid for gambling?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you stupid?
Mm-hmm. No.
No.
No, I was sick. I was struggling with affliction, a disease, a mental illness that just kind of took over for me. That's how I look at it.
Do you ever still say that you did a dumb thing? Like, I should have called the IRS and dealt with my taxes earlier. I've just been dumb about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I struggle with that quite a bit. Like I wish that I dealt with things better. Or yeah, that was stupid to let this go so long to the point where it's jeopardizing, future things. So yeah.
Well, I hear that a lot, is like when you see comments on the internet of gambling's a tax on stupid and people are making their choices and that kind of thing. We certainly do make some choices in there, but once it gets to a point that it's taken over, like our Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that we need like food, air, shelter, and to, I don't know, play a hand of cards or press a button on a machine or something. There's a little bit less of our role in it. We are diagnosed from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. We have something neurochemical in our brains that's gotten wired wrong. And we don't go around saying that about, well, you have diabetes. Yeah?
I do, yeah.
You have some role both in that having happened and in fixing that, from what I know about you, right?
Absolutely. I ate terrible. I didn't take care of myself when I was in my gambling addiction. I gained a bunch of weight. Mm-hmm. And even when I was pre-diabetic, my doctor said, hey, if you don't change this, you're going to become diabetic. And that's going to be something that's going to follow you for the rest of your life. And I didn't take it seriously. And then over the last few years, I started to take it seriously because my health was impacted. I lost the weight. I eat probably 80% clean now. Mm-hmm. And I was able to get my numbers from an 11 A1C to a 6.9, which if you know anything about diabetes, 6.9 is pretty good. It's almost normal.
Yeah, that's exactly what I know you to be about. And I also have eaten terribly most of my life, been morbidly obese, and I am responsible for my own health and my food choices and being well now. I did not get diabetes, so you had a genetic predisposition for it. And so I would suggest that both in terms of that physical disorder and the neurological disorder of the gambling, is that we probably had both a nature-nurture thing going on, and how we got it isn't our responsibility, but how we fix it is. And that it's a daily commitment to taking action. We might have been more unprepared for what was going to happen, or naive or vulnerable. with both of those things, but we weren't stupid and we weren't lazy. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that said, sometimes you hear people say that us folks with gambling disorder are pretty smart. Are we smarter than other folks?
I don't think we're smarter than other folks, but I definitely think we think we are. Or at least I
We
think.
were.
I thought I was anyway. I thought I was getting away with so much, and I absolutely wasn't. I mean, I did for a long time, but I thought I was getting away with more than I was.
Yeah. And now when we talk to our families and they're like, oh yeah, we knew you were lying.
Exactly.
We can't even ask you anymore.
Yeah. Like we were going to mint an Oscar waiting for this to kind of keep going kind of thing. Yeah.
But yeah, we just stood there moving our mouths. And so I would say there's no that I know of, I'm not a research expert. There's no evidence that we're especially more intelligent than anyone else. I think we do, out of necessity, develop a resourcefulness and a determination. And as I've said in other episodes, can we please take a victory lap for having honed those skills and now use them for good and not destruction? And if that's cleaning up the wreckage of our finances or doing good to serve others or doing advocacy work so more people don't suffer in the future, let's use that playing on our toes for doing something like really, really helpful. I think we can also make some space for the fact that there can be co-occurring disorders that happen where maybe we get depressed and we're not always operating at our full intellectual capacity when we can barely move out of like true clinical depression.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so there can be both. I can be ambivalent about that. Looks like we do dumb things. We feel like we're smarter. Neither one is true. Yeah. Have you ever heard that expression that we can be something like, I think it's more of an AA thing, but people with a inferiority complex that are egomaniacs at the same time?
Yeah. Yeah. I know people who have been in that exact situation, where it feels like, yeah, they have to be more of something that they're maybe not necessarily are, or yeah.
So do we have more wrong with us than other people? Like we covered the smarts versus not smarts, but are we especially like lazy or evil or selfish or
morally corrupt? No.
Yeah, no?
Nope.
Does it look like we are like big shots? Do we live in a dream world?
No, I just think we're people that struggle with addiction. I don't believe it has anything to do with being morally corrupt or being, I mean, I want to say selfish, but I mean, there's a huge, selfish is a huge part of it, but laziness, no.
Yeah. I'm trying to get to the point where I can say that the reward center in my brain got wired different and it was behaving as it was supposed to keep its self-fed, and that included certain behaviors that were not pleasant for others that made me do things that I'm now struggling with that caused harm, and I have duty to fix. But I try to focus less on that I have like a defective character as much as just noticing in a mindfulness kind of way, like, there's that. You know what I do? Okay, here's one of them. In like holiday season in front of the grocery store, they have all those like pumpkins.
Mm-hmm.
They just put them in giant pallet boxes out in front. Yeah, I didn't have like a criminal element so much, but I can't go buy those giant pallets of pumpkins without thinking of just taking one. What is that?
Like when you walk out to the car on the way out?
Or drive by in the middle of I wonder if they lock them up at night. Like I really spend emotional energy thinking about the system to keep those pumpkins safe. And I would never actually take one, but there's that like something for nothing
But the brain, that's how your brain's wired. I would say that I probably have some similarity to that. I don't know
Yeah.
if it was necessarily pumpkins, but maybe like, yeah, something that's not locked up that should be locked up. It's almost like my brain's looking for that dopamine high that would come from that.
Yeah. So I was trying to kind of get in the zone to prepare to talk to you today and think about what I might want to say. And I saw I got an email for a $5 coupon from my grocery store if I loaded it on my app, and it wasn't working very well. And so I think I spent like a real considerable amount of time troubleshooting that to get my $5 coupon. And there was some emotion that went with it of like anger towards them that they didn't make it user friendly enough to do for a $5 coupon. And I know that that's part of that relationship with money, with I need something for nothing, of wanting some dopamine from getting something. And that if I just notice that in the future and start to try to move away from that, that's the path I want to be on. I want to work on distress tolerance of being annoyed with stuff like that and not have it take over my day, of emotionally like self-regulating and being able to be kind, of just, I don't know, I installed an app on my phone. By the way, it was called RoboKill or something, because I get a lot of robocalls by having my phone number out there just to help with my work. And anyway, it like hijacked my whole phone system and took like weeks to fix, and going in for visits and calls to customer service. I find that that's really one of the places that I can do the canary in the coal mine test of where I'm at with my emotional self-regulation, is troubleshooting technology on a customer helpline with like a cell phone place. Do you get those opportunities?
A few times, yeah.
Yeah. So I still have a ways to go. I kept it
Me
together
too.
pretty good. Yep.
Me too.
Got my phone fixed, but yeah, it was a battle. Okay, here's one. You need to hit a bottom to start getting better.
I don't agree with that. I don't think, I say I don't agree. I think everybody has their bottom. It just doesn't have to be as bad as somebody else's. Somebody like somebody that's maybe more financial responsible could just kind of hit to the bottom where they don't have as much money in their account and they see that it's starting to be a problem, and then be able to reconcile that and move upwards. Whereas somebody like me, I feel like everything I did, I had to do like, I found the bottom and then I kept digging. Is what I did. I found that, yeah, I got a bulldozer and just kept going is what I did. So I don't believe everybody has to get to that point. And I don't think we should, to make them feel like they're not worthy of recovery, or worthy of help, or worthy of just their situation hurt them because they didn't get to a certain point where society feels like they need to have gotten to be considered struggling, I guess is what I was trying to say.
Yeah. When I was little, I'm 52. We had sugar cereal. They even had names with like Sugar Smacks. I think they changed the name. It's called like Golden Smacks now or something, because they didn't want to be so in your face of that this is just sugar you're feeding kids before school. And kids were like, how can we get more of this cereal? Like we were all just bananas about it. And I think parents were kind of keen to like, this might not be the best thing to give children, but we really wanted it. And now there's like a terrible obesity problem that we normalized, that putting like sugar and salt and like fats and stuff in food and processed food is the way to go. But heart disease is like the number one killer of people, at least older adults over 60 or something. It really like moves to the top. And they don't start doing anything about heart disease really until like you need a bypass. Like the public health model of what would happen if we didn't have sugar cereal and we had people that like had height and weight appropriate and like health and stuff taught to them, and I don't know, incentives with insurance or good coaching, or we made like nutrition programs available and normalized them or something. Like, how would that be to help people that are just starting to see that they're on the beginning of having trouble, how would it be if there would be some kind of intervention with the gambling that's like the first time you blow past that set of time and a budget? I don't know what it would be, but something happens that go, look, just so you know, you've just exhibited a very high risk behavior that will turn into this. And let's do something now to let you know that this really could easily become a problem. You're going to want to super watch out for that. So I keep thinking about that, like hit a bottom talk. I also know that there's a lot of us, and you've probably been there too. I think that we've talked about this, where you know it's bad, but you still don't feel ready to do something about it.
Oh yeah, I spent the last few years in my gambling addiction, knowing that my behaviors were not good, knowing that I was not being the person that I could look in the mirror and be proud of, and knowing that things are wrong, but I was still not ready to place it on gambling. I was putting it on everything else.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
All right. What about forgiving ourselves versus taking accountability? What's the percentage? Are they on the same spectrum? Go ahead.
For me, I think they go hand in hand. For me, I would say they're 50-50. You have to forgive yourself, but you also have to take accountability for your actions. You have to understand that it's okay to forgive myself for these choices that I made, these choices that hurt people, hurt myself, hurt my husband. But it took me a while to accept that. But yes, I feel like they go hand in hand.
I wonder if they could exist at exactly the same time of, I caused harm. I wish I could do it over. I cannot. I can do what I can to fix it going forward and do everything in my power to make it not happen again. That's one of the clinchers, is the would you do anything in your power to have this not happen again? And, you know, early on with my ex-husband, who I desperately wanted to forgive me, I mean, he basically ended our marriage and asked me to leave after trying everything in his power to help me stop. I desperately wanted him to be like, that's okay, you couldn't help it, you had a disease, stuff like that. Girl, it's taken a long time of rebuilding trust with him. And I'm talking about rebuilding trust by being honest about when I struggle too. Like, that's been part of the rebuilding trust, of admitting when it's been really, really hard. But he now does forgive me, and I take accountability for everything, but I'm not going to walk around being like, I suck, I'm the worst. It's not helpful.
Absolutely. It is absolutely not helpful. It's very important to come to that place where you can, I think it's one of the most important things in order for you to move forward, is to be able to forgive yourself and still be able to take accountability for the things that you've done. So
if there was a gift we could give newcomers, it would be like a badge or something that we have them wear. Like, ask me if I forgive myself or something. Like, that is the best shortcut to just saying that, even if you don't believe it, to just practice believing it, to create some neural pathways of self-compassion. So needed. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, so here's our final one, which is fill in the blank. I gambled because blank, like my childhood trauma, or the pandemic.
I gambled for so many reasons. I'm still finding them. But I would say the biggest one is just escaping overwhelmingness, escaping the pressure of life, and escaping not meeting the expectations I set out for myself. So if I had to fill in the blank with just one word, it really does boil down to just escape, period.
Yeah. There was an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, like 30 years ago.
I knew you were my soul sister.
Do you watch that?
Oh, I do. My mom watched Star Trek when I was growing up. I mean, she took me to all the Star Wars movies. That's where I get my love of sci-fi from. And But yeah.
Yeah, there was one, I can't remember what it was called, but Lieutenant Barclay got addicted to the holodeck and he started lying about
I
where he
remember that
was and
one.
missing
Yes.
work. Remember
Hmm.
that one?
I
And
do.
he would have like he could tell his bosses like you can't tell me what to do and stuff like that when he was on the holodeck. And I think he was like dating Troy and like all of this fantasy stuff was coming true in that episode. If folks are able to look it up, it's really just ironic how closely it follows like our gambling story. But I agree, it was escape. And when I hear people talk about like, oh well, there's like action gamblers that are people that want the adrenaline rush, and then there's like escape gamblers, and those are typically women. And I don't know. I mean, don't we all just want to get some dopamine and feel good? Like, can we just have it be like it felt good and it was fun and whatever else? Like sometimes we would gamble because we had a bad day, but sometimes we would gamble because we had a good day and
Yeah. Very true.
it was Tuesday or the sun was out or the
Sometimes you just
sun
didn't need a
wasn't out,
reason.
right? And knowing that helps me know that it could come back. And until I start chiseling away and doing a deep dive into whatever that I gambled because blank was, that I've been lonely every day of my life, no matter how loved I was or who was around me, that I've not felt successful at careers, or that I feel scared all the time, that my sensory issues could come back in and take over. Like there's all of these things that I'm going to have to keep working on in monitoring like my own mental health, my own ability to reach out and talk about vulnerability. You and I have this agreement of talking about vulnerability.
Me too. Like this past week, I struggled, and I don't know if it's because like, I find myself struggling when I do talk about like the date and how many days that I've gone consecutively without gambling or something like that, because it almost like puts this pressure on me. And now that my voice is out there and well, now my face, talking about gambling addiction and recovery, it does add this kind of layer of where it makes it harder for me to talk sometimes about when I'm struggling, because I feel like, well, if people think I'm struggling, then they're going to think that I can't help them. And that's just not the truth of it all. We're all just trying to get this addiction behind us, get our mental health in a better place, and get our lives in a place that, we can find that peace and serenity. And so, yeah, it's tough, but I really try to break the wall of that.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Thank you for saying that. And I think that's especially true for some of us that are like in the public eye in recovery. So one thing that I've done recently to try to work on that is I think I have some bottled up grief, and I could define grief of just like anything that I wanted to be better or different than it was, not necessarily just loss of lives, but loss of my marriage, loss of my career that I was trained for, loss of my trust in myself, and that kind of thing. And I went and got training at this place to become a grief recovery method specialist. And I'm going to start offering online grief recovery groups. And I'm not sure what the whole structure will be, but I think if people are getting to a place that they're feeling like, I want to start unpacking some of this. It's not counseling, it's just education. But they're wanting to look at where are those like incomplete relationships from the past that could keep coming up again and again and making us vulnerable in our gambling recovery. Like maybe we should form a group and start doing some of that work together of using either that method or another one. So I'll leave my contact information at the end here if people want to get in touch with me about it. It's not fully formed yet, but I'm Kitty Martz. I'm the Executive Director of Voices of Problem Gambling Recovery. And we have a peer program. I am a certified recovery or gambling mentor. And you can reach me at vpgr.net. And there's a formula pill out there. And if you're interested in knowing more about that grief recovery group, I'll just kind of put together a list of folks that want to do it, and maybe we could get something together and start working on this. Thanks for having me again today.
Well, thanks, Kitty. We appreciate you so much, and I look forward to the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.